Okay, quick look at the agenda today. We're going to cover three main topics. The first of which is going to be the project scoring worksheet. And really, this is just a tool that we built for you to help you guys come up with those probability of failure, consequence of failure scores. And we've even thrown in a little tool to help you develop your own risk matrix. Then after that, we'll move on to ACES programming guidance. So now that you have your scores, your probability of failure and consequence of failure, how are you going to put that into ACES so that we can pull all of the data and score and prioritize projects? And then finally, we'll move on to the Installation Commander Prospectus, which is a nice little worksheet that we've put together where you can identify your installation's priorities, present it to the Wing Commander, very visual, standardized format, and get their final approval. So with that, we'll just dive right into the project scoring worksheet. Why we built it. As I mentioned, we built it as a tool for you. This is not a deliverable that's going to be submitted to us. We were just hoping to make your lives a little bit easier. We've made a lot of changes in the ways that we are going to calculate scores, so we've tried to automate some of that. You input your condition index, and then it'll spit out your probability of failure score. Another reason that we built it is to ensure that you're seeing what we see. Historically, every installation, every Matchcom will build their own spreadsheet, their own scoring tool, and then there's the A file, and then we had our own scoring tools here. And inevitably, all of these different documents, all these different tools come up with something a little bit different. So by creating this one project scoring tool, we can make sure that we're all seeing the same numbers. If you haven't opened it up yet, when you open the project scoring tool, which is on the CE portal in the business rules folder, you're going to see a ton of tabs, starting with a simple PT test type scoring chart. So if everybody out there has ever taken your PT test, or for those of you that have, you do 42 push-ups and you get X number of points. This chart is going to work the same way. Your condition index is 75, you get 82 points for probability of failure. Your MDI is 45, you're going to get X points for your consequence of failure. So really easy. In addition to that, we've given you a single worksheet to track all of your requirements, where you can just input every project, the condition index, MDI, priority, it'll spit out the score. And then we've also included individual tabs for AMP-specific calculations. So as I mentioned when we were looking at that risk matrix, all projects are going to be scored based off of probability of failure and consequence of failure, but every AMP defines that a little bit differently. The facilities AMP uses the condition index found in Builder. Pavements are going to be using PCI. Utilities, not quite spun up in SMS yet, so they've got some models and some scoring algorithms that are built on several different factors and weighting those depending on what type of a system it is. So these AMP-specific tabs will help you come up with those numbers that you can just plug in to the main spreadsheet for your final scores. As I mentioned, all of the documents we're going to talk about today are on the CE portal, the integration program group, and then if you go to documents and the first folder that contains all the business rules, the project scoring calculator or the project scoring worksheet is Appendix B. Okay, and with that, we'll just go ahead and jump right into a quick tutorial on how to use it. Now, before you can start plugging things into the project scoring worksheet, you need to do a little bit of groundwork, a little bit of prep work first. And step one, and we've said this in previous briefings, step one is going to be to complete your facility or your asset assessment inventory. So you got to go out there, see what kind of condition it's in, what type of work is required. And these condition indices that you come up with by doing those assessments and inventories are going to be the basis for that probability of failure score. Step two is going to be establish your project scope. Now, step two and step one kind of interchangeable because for FY15, I'm sure a lot of you guys already know what projects you want to do because last year we were already starting to take a look at FY15. And if that's the case, great. But you still have to go out and do a condition assessment to come up with that condition index. If you don't already have a project scope in mind and you just know that, hey, building 705 is in terrible shape, go out there, do a complete facility assessment, And then once you're done, you can take a look at the results in Builder, see what parts of the building need attention, and then maybe put together your scope of work from there. Okay, so do your inventory so you can come up with your condition index, and then establish your project scope. And then after that, you can start entering all this information into the scoring worksheet to come up with your final scores. So we'll go ahead and take a peek at that. But before we do, if there's anybody out there that hasn't had a chance yet to take a look at Builder, I wanted to point this out, do a quick screenshot so that you guys can see what I'm talking about with regards to these condition indices. So this that we're looking at is a standard report that Builder can generate called the Condition Index Detail Report. And as you can see, it's going to line out every little element, component, system in the building and the condition that it's in. Okay, so our guidance has changed a little bit in the business rules, so I wanted to make sure I hit on this in terms of which condition index you're going to use. If you look at the screen capture that's up there right now, there are 4 columns: building condition index, system condition index, component condition index, and then section component condition index, or component section condition index. For our purposes, for the FY15-16 IPL, do not use the building condition index. There's a couple of reasons behind this. Number one, it's not really an accurate indicator of the overall condition of the building. From what we've seen in using this tool and kind of doing some tests at the bases, we're not entirely confident in the way Builder is rolling up those component values or the subordinate values to come up with that final number. Also, building condition index would really only be accurate if you were planning on literally tearing down the whole building and every single part of it, which even when you're doing an entire facility renovation would not be true. I mean, it's going to take into account basement walls and foundations and structural columns and all that stuff. Okay, so you're either going to use system condition index, your component condition index, or your component section condition index. And that's going to be, which one you choose is going to be driven by what the project scope is. Are you just replacing 1 or 2 light bulbs or 1 or 2 smoke detectors? If that's the case, then you're probably going to want to use that section, component section condition index. If you're going in there and you're doing the entire fire suppression system, a system condition index, your SCI, might be more appropriate. So for that, we're going to say use your common sense, work with your folks over in ops and ops engineering to have them help you, or they'll probably be the ones building your scope of work and helping you calculate your condition index. Okay, so once you've given this report a good scrub, you can start getting to work in the project scoring worksheet. So give me just a second and I'm going to switch over to that. Okay, so hopefully you've seen this already. If not, this is the project scoring worksheet. The very first tab that you're going to see when you open it up on the left-hand side is our BI scoring charts, our built infrastructure scoring charts. And these are those PT charts that I was talking about. So this tab right here is really for information only. There's nothing for you to input in here. This is just your simple lookup table. A condition index of 68 will get you a score of 64, and so on. The only thing that you do need to input on this tab is your Matchcom. So if you see right now, the Matchcom priorities and the points are 0 because we haven't selected a Matchcom. So if you go up there and say, all right, I'm from ACC, your number of priorities and the associated points will all auto-populate for you. Switch it to USAFA or AFCEC or smaller bases or smaller Matchcoms, and you'll see it adjust appropriately. Okay, so that's all you got to know on this one. The second worksheet is your Matchcom IPL worksheet, but you know what, frankly, it could be an installation IPL worksheet too. If you just want to track all of your requirements in one place, it's a great place to do it. So it's pretty straightforward, self-explanatory. you're going to fill in all the white columns. The gray and the yellow will auto-populate. So you would come in here, write your installation, project number, title, PA, and then your condition index, MDI, priority, and savings to investment ratio, and everything else will populate for you. And we'll come back and do an example in this in just a couple minutes. Okay, the next one. This is actually new. It was not in the original version that we released. We were playing around a little bit this week and thought it would be cool if we could help you guys generate your own risk matrix. So you can see where your projects fall on this risk chart. So the one disclaimer I'll give on this is that right now we've only built this so that it can handle up to 10 projects. It takes a lot of fat fingering and going in and programming each and every one of those bubbles to show up on the chart. So we'll keep working to hopefully add some more for you. After the risk matrix, you start to get into your AMP-specific tabs, starting with facilities. And we tried to give you pretty clear directions on what you need to put in here for each one. For each one of these tabs, facilities, pavement, utilities, the goal of these is to help you calculate the overall condition index for your requirement or for your project, and also the weighted average MDI in the event that you're working on either different facilities or different sections of pavement that might have different MDI. Okay, so here's our facilities where you're going to enter your facility number, MDI, your uniformat code for the item or the piece of work that you're going to be doing. And this uniformat code comes directly from that builder printout that I showed you. And we can go back and look at that if we need to. A quick description of what the item of work is. And you can see, just to kind of show you in here, we've included several different levels of work. So for example, roofing, that's an entire system. So we used a system condition index, and the uniformat code for that was B30. And then we also did the fire alarm detectors, which are component section condition index, uniformat level 4. So again, which condition index and what level you're going to go to is really just driven by the scope of work. What kind of work are you doing? So you're going to pull the condition index off of that report that we looked at, and then you're also going to include the cost for that element of work. And we had this question come up earlier today. That cost, it does not come from Builder. It doesn't have to come from Builder. We actually recommend that you continue to do cost estimates how you have in the past. Every civil engineering squadron is used to creating their own cost estimate. And frankly, you guys are the experts. If you look at historical values, previous projects that you've done, the numbers that you come up with are going to be more accurate than what Builder can produce. And that's mainly due to the fact that Builder is a little bit outdated in terms of the RF means data that it has in it. Worst case scenario, if you don't know where to start, you can reference Builder. Okay, so moving on to the Pavements tab, a quick peek at that. I'm not going to go into too much detail on pavements because we have a transportation webinar coming up on the 28th of January, same time, same GCO link, so 9 o'clock and 1600 Central Standard Time, same link, and Mr. Brian Lee will walk you through all of your questions on pavements. Next up we have utilities, and you can see that we actually have utilities broken down by sub-amp. And I really recommend that if you're going to be working on utilities projects, take a look at those business rules, because the business rules make it very clear how to use this chart. If you're working on a distribution system, which one of these criteria are going to apply, what the weight should be, versus if it's a storage tank or a pump or something like that. So they break it out very well, help you calculate your condition index and your average MDI, and then you're all set. So once you have that condition index and the average MDI, which you're going to get on each one of these tabs, you can go back to that main tab and start to input some of your values. So for example, we'll use this facilities one. I had a weighted average condition index of 46 and a weighted average MDI of 85. So if I go back to my tab here, let's do a sample project. We're at Minot Air Force Base. And then a fake project number here. And then I had my condition index was 46, MGI was 85. You can see it's all just going to populate as I go. If you are at an installation, this next part, you're not going to know. You won't know what the Matchcom priority for that project is until the MCAMPs are complete. So you've got two options. Number one, you can leave it blank and just really focus on the part of the consequence of failure score that is associated with your MGI. Number two, you could be a wishful thinker and go ahead and assign yourself a number one priority. The one thing I'll do before we go too far is go and adjust my Matchcom so that I get the right values in there. And then your SIR. Every project we are hoping to see an SIR. So that's your savings to investment ratio. And so typically we've only been thinking about savings for energy related projects or demo projects. But almost every project should be able to identify some savings, whether it's efficiency, by replacing old equipment with newer models, or something along those lines. So SIR, hopefully we'll see something in there. We're going to do a small one right now, 0.05. And you can see all of this auto-populated and came up with my total score. Over here on the left, you can identify the program type. We'll go ahead and say that was RMM. That one's not critical, doesn't mess with the math at all. And then if you take a peek over at the risk matrix, fingers crossed, we should see our first project show up. Okay, now the bubble looks huge, and that's really because there's only one bubble on there. It doesn't have a lot to compare it to. And then number two, it's falling off the side of the chart because it has absolutely maxed out the probability of failure based on the condition index. So it is in that high risk quadrant. Now I'm going to close this one and open up another document so that you can see what the total risk matrix would look like. Okay, so here's another example that I filled out prior to this webinar so that you can see how it would look with several projects on the chart. So you can see that this project, number 5, must have a huge savings value because that bubble's pretty big. So if you go look at the worksheet, you can see we had relatively low SIRs, or savings to investment ratios, with the exception of that project number 5 that had an SIR of 4.5. All right, so that rounds out my tutorial for how to use this project scoring worksheet. Like I said, our goal was really to make your job easier, to save you guys the trouble of building your own, because we know everybody was. So really, you input a couple of values, it'll pop out your score, and this is the data that's going to feed directly into ACES. So with that, I'm going to stop talking and open it up to questions.
Okay. First one we received, will you be discussing new A-file templates?
Okay, so the first question that we got was about new A-file templates, and we had this one earlier today as well. Will the A-file be updated to reflect this new scoring model? And the best answer I can give for this is stay tuned. We're still trying to figure that out. Right now we are renegotiating our task order with the engine room, so depending on the results of that, the A-file will be updated. But that's why we've given you this project scoring tool in the meantime, so that you can do your calculations and get that information into ACES now.
The next question, so we do one of these for each project.
Okay, so the question is, do we need to do one of these for each project? And yes, you're going to have to calculate the score for each project. Like I said, though, these are not deliverables, so we don't need to see a completed tab or a completed workbook for every single project. So this is a tool for you guys to use to come up with your score. The one thing that I didn't mention, and I'll talk about later in the programming piece, the only thing that we're going to want to see out of this on those AMP-specific tabs, we will ask you to copy and paste the rows from the table that you use to calculate your condition index and your MVI, and paste those into the remarks section in ACES. And the only reason we're doing that is so that if a score just looks completely off the wall, we can go in and do some data validation and try and see where those numbers came from.
And this one's been added. Do you film the presentation for later reference?
Do we film this presentation for later reference? Absolutely. We are still struggling a little bit to find the best way to get them to you guys in the field, though. So right now we're still trying to pry them out of DCO to make them a little bit more accessible. But we'll post that as soon as we have it.
Who calculates the SIR? Energy folks? Question mark.
Okay, the question is who calculates the SIR and whether or not that was energy folks.
Could be anyone.
Yeah, it could be energy. It could be anyone, frankly. We had a webinar on savings and how to calculate your SIR last week, and so that was recorded also. So we can post that, but the savings calculator is also a tool that we've developed to help walk you through that calculation. So it doesn't necessarily have to just be energy.
Will relevance to environmental projects be discussed?
Will relevance to environmental projects be discussed? So the one part of the scoring tool that I did kind of glaze over was the natural infrastructure tab. Let me see if I can pull that back up real quick. Okay, so way over here on the right, we actually do have several tabs left for natural infrastructure. Okay, and so natural infrastructure is going to have their own scoring model, but it's still going to be based off of probability of failure, consequence of failure, and saving. So those same three threads are going to run through all these models. And the reason we separated it out is because base level programmers won't be the ones putting all of this into ACES. This is going to be done by the ISTs and the RSTs. So it's in here just in case you want to see it, or try and plug your own projects in there to see what would happen. But we kept it separate for that reason.
Will the sample worksheets be available to you?
Will the sample worksheets be available? Currently, the project scoring tool that is posted on the CE portal in the business rules, each of those AMP-specific tabs do have sample information in them. So, yes.
For the risk matrix, can you explain one more time what the terms of the size of the bubble?
Yes, for the risk matrix, the size of that bubble, or the size of your plot, is based off of the savings to investment ratio calculation, which was again covered in the webinar last week. So based on your SIR, that drives how big that bubble is.
Is the intent to put multiple projects on each of the utility tabs or complete one project when they record it?
So the question is, if the intent is to put several projects on the facilities tab, utilities tab, pavements tab, or just one, and I would say my recommendation would be to use one project per tab, and then either make a copy of it so you can do another one, or once you've captured the data, you can clear it out. It's really up to you. But I probably wouldn't mix and match multiple projects on one tab.
How do you approach scoring a multi-use facility like a squadron ops?
Okay, so how do you approach scoring a multi-use facility like a squadron ops, AMU, or hangar? So I think for this one, you would probably want to go to the associate cat code level, since there's going to be a separate cat code and MDI for each one of those functional areas. And then depending on what area of the building you're doing the work, that's going to be the MDI that you would enter for that facility, that calculation. Did I hit the right answer? No, not at the associate cat code level.
While we're waiting on that, we can get one back. Is there a specific format for information to be pasted in the report?
Yes. The question is there a specific format for information to be pasted into the remarks section of ACES? Absolutely, and I'm going to show you that when we talk programming, but to put it really simply, it's literally a copy-paste. You copy the rows of the table that you used, Control-C, go into the remarks section, Control-V. I'll show you a screen capture of what that will look like a little bit later. It doesn't necessarily end up pretty, but the data's in there and it's enough for us to use.
The next question, although the spreadsheet tools will be used to help installations of Matchcom, their data internet ACES basically on the other cost tag is what will be used to support the project, correct?
Yeah, so Mr. Waldron from AFCEC, thank you, because you made an excellent point. That yes, these spreadsheets are tools to help you calculate your scores, but ACES is and will continue to be the definitive data source. So the truth is what's in ACES. Right, so whether you have put it into the project scoring worksheet or on the installation command or prospectus, it doesn't matter until it's in ACES.
And we had a follow-up with respect to the multi-use facilities. I guess we need to know a little more what they're asking there. How do you approach scoring?
Okay, so looks like a follow-up on the multi-use facility.
What's the question? What is the question?
I'll go.
Whoever, I guess, two, I think it was.
It's Kadena.
So how do you approach scoring the multi-use facility? Question about the MDI?
So if somebody who asked the question, okay, please repeat the answer on the question regarding multi-use facility like a squadron, ops, AMU, or hangar. So are you asking if you could clarify how you would come up with the MDI for the project, or what specifically about that facility? Okay, so what we'll do is we'll kind of discuss that one in the sidebar, and if we haven't addressed it, we'll get to it again at the end of this briefing. If not, we can address it with you on the side either through email, or we'll answer all the questions in a Word document and then post them. Okay, so if that's the only outstanding question, we'll go ahead and move on to the programming stuff. Okay, so for the programming portion of the webinar today, we'll do a little bit of myth busting first. This is our thing that we like to do in webinars. Okay, so the first myth is that new programming guidance has completely replaced previous requirements, and that is completely false. Basic program requirements are still valid, so all of that standard project data that you were putting into the programming tab, the supplemental tab, the other costs and all that stuff still needs to go there. The only, or the biggest change is that we've added some new fields that will be required for scoring and prioritization of projects for the FY15-16 IFL. Myth number 2 is that this is going to be a huge increase in the amount of work that's required of our programmers. And again, not true. So number 1, we've only added a couple of extra fields into the other cost screen, 4 total. Number 2, this isn't only the programmer's job. So you've got a lot of folks over in ops engineering, all of your AMP and sub-AMP managers who can and should help programmers calculate your condition index and your scores. They should be managing those inventories and helping feed all of that information. They can even program some of these requirements as necessary. So this isn't just a huge workload on the programmers. Now this webinar is going to just focus on the new AFCEC specific fields, because I'm going to throw it out there. I am not an ACES expert. I haven't been in programming since my second lieutenant years in Minot. So we're really just going to look at that new stuff. If you need a refresher on complete programming guidance, it's available in the business rules, which are again on the CE portal, integration program group, documents, business rules, and they're in Appendix H. And what I'd say too is to pay particular attention at the end of that programming document. There are a couple of tables that list every single required field. So that's kind of a good table to use as your checklist when you're doing your programming for these projects. So we're going to move kind of quickly through these first couple of slides because these are the basics and nothing has changed here. So on your programming tab, you're still going to be required to input things like your project number, title, fiscal year, program type, all that good stuff. Your project facility cost screen, we've highlighted on the top how you would get there. Pull down on those, either one of those arrows, and you'll be in your project facility costs, where again we've given you a table here. You're going to input your funds type, your base, if it didn't auto-populate, facility number, CAT code, and so on. Okay, the supplemental tab, still the same information here, requiring Matchcom, agent, and then also one thing I do want to point out, because it came up in the earlier webinar today, you would still go in if you have a RAC code and go ahead and enter it here, a fire safety deficiency code, ATFP, because sometimes you might want to do a data pull to see how many RAC 3s you have on your installation. Another one that has come up in previous webinars and meetings is wing priority. Wing priority is absolutely still something that you would input on this supplemental tab, because although there are no points associated with it, that is your voice to the Matchcom. So absolutely still populate your wing priority field. Okay, so now moving on to the AFCEC specific information. So this is the stuff that has changed. All of this is going to go onto the other cost screen. So at the very bottom of your screen, you see other costs. Click on that, and you'll be in your other cost screen. This is where we need you to input those scores that we're going to use to rack and stack and prioritize all of the FY15-16 projects. So we have populated them for you in this screen capture, but when you open up this screen, it will be blank. You'll have to use the pull-down menus to select the right item name, the fiscal year 2015, or whatever year you're programming your project for. And then you're going to type in your consequence of failure, your probability of failure, condition index, and savings to investment ratio. And yes, these will show up as dollar signs, and it looks weird. And if you're OCD like me, it's going to bug you. But there's a reason why we did it, and that's because on this other cost screen, we can limit the input to make sure that it's a numerical value. On the Unique tab, where we had previously been inputting a lot of our scoring information, that was not true. So somebody could have written that their consequence of failure was purple, and we wouldn't have been able to do anything about it. This way we can at least make sure that we are going to pull a number when we do our data pull and be able to assign it a score. Okay, the next big change for the AFCEC specific programming is what's going to go in your text section. So on your main tab, bottom left, you can find your text button. Open that up, and you'll see your standard description, justification, and remarks. Now, in our business rules that we published just last week, week before, we had said we want you to copy and paste those charts out of the project scoring worksheet into the description section of this page. And this morning we were corrected. Somebody made a really good point. The description and the justification boxes directly feed those 1391s that can be generated from ACES. So if we had you put all of this information into the description, your 1391 would be a mess. So instead, we've asked you to copy and paste all of those rows, those tables that you used in the project scoring worksheet into the remarks section. And as I mentioned, it's not necessarily pretty. The column headings kind of get a little wonky, but it's not going to be used for scoring purposes. And in the event that we need to come in here and do some data validation, we'll deal with cleaning up the data so that we can get the information. That's all we got there. And then finally, we wanted to address the topic of design. Design has been a big issue lately, so we'll make it very clear right now. If you have an FY15 project that requires FY14 design funds, we need you to program that and let us know now. Okay, so go into ACES, put that FY15 project in there, mark fund indicator D, and then in the design fiscal year, make sure that it says 2014. We are going to do a poll on the 1st of March to grab all of those projects that were programmed for 2015 and need design funds in 2014, and any requirement that meets those programming requirements, or those that has the fund indicator in there, and has an MDI of at least 80 and a probability of failure of 80, will be on our list to receive design funds. And we're not saying that that's all. Those are the only ones we'll fund. That's our starting point, is MDI of 80, probability of failure of 80. If we have more money and we can fund more design, we'll just keep lowering that bar to fund more projects. If you have an FY15 project that needs FY15 design funds, program your project as FY15, design fund indicator D, and then your design fiscal year 2015. Now, for the sake of our 2-year IPL, we've had a lot of questions. How do you program a 2-year IPL? What fiscal year should they say? Every requirement that you have identified for 2015 and 2016 should be programmed as fiscal year 2015 unless you absolutely cannot execute that project until 2016. So there might be some logistical requirements, some host nation issues that need to fall into place. You need a full year to do that design, and that's fine. If you absolutely cannot execute till 2016, program it FY 2016, design 2015. If you could execute in either year, depending on when you get money, mark it 2015. Okay, so that rounds out all of our new AFCEC specific programming guidance. Again, if you need to review the complete programming guidance, it's available in the business rules. All of these slides were actually screen captures from the business rules, and those are available on our portal integration page. The link's right there, and like I said, pay attention to those tables right at the end of the document that contain all of the mandatory fields. And now we'll open it up to questions. Be gentle. Like I said, I'm not an expert.
Question was, can a batch upload be done to add data to those new required fields?
Okay, so the question is, will a batch upload be done, or can a batch upload be done to load data into all of those new required fields? And I know that that would make life a lot easier, but unfortunately the answer for right now is going to be no. We don't have the capability and the means to do that right now.
The next question, when the other cost fields are already in use, how will this impact new data going in?
So the question is, if the other cost fields are already in use, where are we going to put our consequence of failure, probability of failure, condition index, and all that stuff? And that's an interesting predicament. I don't think we were aware that a lot of people are using those fields, but that those numbers need to be in there somewhere. So consolidate where you can. Maybe push those further down or kind of lump them together if possible. But those 4 numbers need to be in the other cost screen so that your project can be scored. So it might mean moving some of that data that you have in the other costs to a different location.
Next question, so BACA should be absent, correct?
Okay. So the question was if DACA should be AFCEC, and the answer is it depends. If AFCEC is doing the design, yes, but it could be the core, it could be another entity, so it's going to be project dependent. It doesn't necessarily have to be AFCEC.
What is the difference between the base and wing priority?
Okay, so the question is, what is the difference between the base and the wing priority? And yeah, we pull wing priority. Yeah.
We're pulling Matchcom.
Okay, and yeah, so if I said base or wing priority, really they were interchangeable in my mind. Wing priority is what gets populated in ACES, And that's what your installations are going to be pushing to the Matchcom for consideration when they build their MCAMP. Your wing priority does not go directly into the scoring model, so it's not tied to any point. That's just a message that's being sent up to the Matchcom for consideration when building their MCAMP. Matchcom priority is the only one that earns points in the model. The prospectus isn't pulling anything.
So what did that do?
Wing.
Okay.
So there's been a lot of there's been a lot of talk about ops engineering supporting the programming team. Is this information going down through the ops functional?
Yeah.
Detailed.
So the question is, I mentioned that ops engineering was going to be there to provide support to the programmers, and the question was whether or not that message is also being sent through the ops channels, and the answer is yes.
Detailed in the P-plan?
Right. It's detailed in the P-plan,
Detailed in the playbook?
in the playbook.
And it's been aggressively communicated from AFCEC Ops.
Yeah, we're communicating from AFCEC Ops. Our AMP managers are talking to Matchcom and installation AMP managers all the time. So yes, the message is out there that we're all going to be working together to get these inventories done and to get these new scores calculated.
Says the next question sounds like design build is the choice of execution. Design, RFP, build, and construction take fiscal year. Is this the intent?
One more time?
It's something design build.
So this is Zach Payne over in AFCEC. The question was about design build, and is it the intent to have design and execution in the same year? And the answer is no.
Not necessarily.
The long-term intent is to do a design bid build theoretically to help us drive down costs and better establish estimates in terms of our construction. This year is going to be obviously an odd year since we don't have the FY15 list yet. So the intent of doing the early design poll is to get started on those FY15 construction projects now, so that we're ready to start construction in FY15. Once the IPLs are approved, we will be doing a similar process for all the FY16 construction projects and issuing ATA on those designs so hopefully we can pick them up with end of year fallout and get started on those designs so that we have all of FY15 to do those 16 designs. Hopefully that answers that question.
Okay, so it looks like the next question that's being said to me is the unique tab being used? And yes, the unique tab is being used, mainly by environmental, which is why I hit it, because the ISTs and the RSTs are going to be putting all of that EQ information in there, but there might still be one or two leftover items that we've used in the past on the unique tab that will still be there. Okay, so what has changed is that some of the stuff that used to go on the unique tab, LMI, airfield waivers, is no longer necessary for scoring purposes because those things are taken into account by your condition index and your probability of failure, consequence of failure. If there's another reason to be putting that on the unique tab other than scoring, then keep it there. And EQ is absolutely still using the unique tab.
Is there a limit to the number of projects that can be submitted?
Is there a limit to the number of projects that can be submitted for consideration on the IPL? No. Every installation can program as many projects as they want to. Every Matchcom can submit as many projects as they want to or prioritize as many projects as they want to. The only place where there's a limit is the number of priorities that will receive points for being a Matchcom priority, and that's driven by the size of the Matchcom PRV.
Next two questions. So the next two questions, this is Zach Payne again, are about the design. The first one said basically, will there be a design 1 to N list developed to help us build a 2-year program? And then the follow on from Effie Warren was, if you fund a design in FY15, can we count on that project being funded in the FY16 cycle? So our whole intent with this process is and this year's probably not a good year, but so for 15 and 16, we're going to identify our one-to-end list of requirements, and we know what is going on up at air staff with the budget and what we anticipate in dollars and what we're going to get in our program. So we're going to have to make some assumptions there of how far down the list we're going to get. So our intent is to draw a theoretical line for the FY15 program and then another one for the 16 program, and anything that's in that window for the 16 program, we're going to want to look to go out and start design on. Can I guarantee that if we design it, we'll fund it? No, I can't, because sequestration and other things, we don't have the crystal ball here. But our intent is to tighten up what we are funding design for so that it is true requirements that we absolutely intend to execute should the budget come through the way we want it to.
Okay, so following up on one or two more questions that have rolled in, Kadina asked, the original guidance was to focus on our top 10 projects only. Is this no longer the case? And Colonel Meeker went ahead and answered that and said the Matchcoms have a target number of projects that they need to prioritize and submit, and then it's really up to them to tell their installations how many projects they want to see from the installation. Our installation commander Prospectus does have an area to show the top 10 installation priorities, or wing priorities, base priorities. If you don't choose to use all of those, that's really your prerogative or your Matchcom's prerogative. So look to your Matchcom for guidance regarding how many projects they want each base to submit and when. Okay, and there's questions rolling in. Where will the videos, where will the Q&As be posted? Q&As, expect to see those on the CE portal. Videos, again, stay tuned. We're trying to get those out of DCO to a more usable format, YouTube, something along those lines. So we'll make sure and post that answer when we've got it. All right, and if that's it for programming, we'll move on to the final part of today's webinar, which is the Installation Commander Prospectus. Okay, so the business rules mentioned the Commander's Prospectus, but we really wanted to give you a little bit more information and to show you a visual and show you just how easy this document is going to be to use and how awesome we think it is. We're biased, but yeah. Okay, so the Installation Commander Prospectus is something that we developed following a meeting with General Carter where she expressed some concern that installation commanders did not always feel like their voice was heard. You know, that they had prioritized projects and it went up to the major commands and they felt like they were ignored or their priorities were reversed, things along those lines. So we wanted to come up with one standard way for installation commanders to receive the message from civil engineers, here's our top priorities, here's what we recommend, and they can make decisions and adjust as necessary. But then they would have that same standardized format to communicate a very clear message to the major command. Okay? And we've also given them an opportunity not just to do it by assigning a number or a priority, but this document provides them the opportunity to put in a little bit of a narrative, a description, to explain why their top 10 priorities might not necessarily line up with the top 10 scoring projects. So here's a quick peek at what it looks like. You can see that we've got your risk matrix up top that will show the installation's top 10 projects. Right below that, there's a chart that shows in table form the project title, PA, and the project score. And then, as I mentioned, there's that narrative area where they can provide a description and justification, maybe lobby for Matchcom prioritization. They can discuss their savings projects or good returns on investment, and then sign it and send it up to the major command. Okay, so we recently just published these installation prospecti on the CE portal, and one has been created for every installation. Okay, they're on the CE portal, Program Integration Group page. On the left-hand side, you're going to go to Data Polls, and they're right there in their Matchcom folders. When you open it up, the file is going to be an Excel workbook. And we've tried to make this so super simple so that it's easy. There shouldn't be a lot of extra work for anyone. First tab when you open it up is going to be the instructions, where, like I said, we tried to make it very clear what's going to go on each tab and how you use this document. The next tab you're going to see is General, and this is where you're going to enter your installation name, your installation commander's name, rank, etc. The one question that did come up this morning, is what about those unique situations where we have tenants, we have, 2 wings, 1 base, all that sort of stuff. Really, the answer to this is the person you want to sign this document is the person who has always chaired your facility board. So if that's not necessarily your, quote, wing commander, then input the right person's name and information here. Okay? So this is your facility board chair, their signature that we want to see on this document. Next up are your top 10 priorities. Really simple. Enter your project number, title, programmed amount, what program it falls in, and then your 3 scores, probability of failure, consequence of failure, and savings to investment ratio. And then at the bottom of the screen, this is your chance to tell us what the model doesn't see, what the model doesn't capture. So for example, if priority number 1, only has a score of 125 and there's something our model just doesn't capture, explain it. Explain how that project impacts your mission and why it's so important. Next up are your savings projects. Our business rules lay it out that not every single requirement or project is going to be risk-based. Some projects are just smart investments. We can save a lot of money if we do them. So this is your chance to advocate for those projects if you have any at your installation. So we've given you an opportunity to put 5 in here. Enter the project number, title, cost, the savings to investment ratio, and then again use that text box to explain what is the project, what's the scope of work, what's my savings per year going to look like, all of those things that make it a really, really good investment to go after. Okay, and the last tab that you're going to have to fill out is the inventory status. Eventually, we would love to make this automated. As soon as we figure out how to get all of our SMS systems to talk to ACES, to talk to the engine room, A-file, all that stuff, we want to fill this out for you. But for this year, it's going to be a self-assessment. So in our business rules, we have set out some goals with respect to facility and asset assessments across your installation. The first goal is that we want your 20 worst systems for each AMP or sub-AMP inventoried and input into SMS, where applicable, by the 15th of May. And in addition to those 20 worst systems, remember to do your AFCEC inventories because those are hugely important if you want those projects scored. Okay, so AFCEC requirements and 20 worst systems by the 15th of May. The goal, the pie in the sky that we're going after is 100% inventory by FY18. Because as we move further and further down this road of SMS and restricted budgets, making investments based on real data is going to become crucial. So if we don't get this data into the system so that we can really prove and argue for our budget, we're really doing ourselves a disservice in the long run. Okay, so your life cycle requirements are all of the requirements that you can capture in SMS, repairs, recurring maintenance, things of that nature. Non-life cycle requirements will be for all those things that don't fit into SMS. So if you've got minor construction or leases and grants, things of that nature, put those in ACES and then capture your status with respect to those requirements right here. The text box at the bottom is for you guys to provide us with some feedback. How are the inventories going? What challenges have you run into? Have you come up with any best practices? Things that you recommend we change for the future? This is your chance to talk to us. So make sure you put a good description of how everything's going in there. And then the final tab is your report. So this is your first chance to do a sanity check and to take a look and make sure everything looks how you want it to look. So once you fill in your top 10 requirements, this risk matrix will auto-populate. So you can take a peek at that. And then if you scroll down the rest of the screen, you'll see the remainder of the report. Next up, printing. If you're not familiar with computers or Microsoft Excel, here are your instructions with how to print. The actual reason that we put this in there is because we recommend you print this to a PDF as opposed to just printing it straight from Excel. And the reason is, you know, page breaks and margins can always be a little bit funny. So print it first to a PDF before you actually print a hard copy and get your commander's signature. And a reminder, always save your work. You never know when that computer's going to go down. And this is what your final prospectus will look like. So on the front, you're going to have that risk matrix, top 10 risk-based projects, your 5 savings-based, if you have 5, go ahead and put them there. Your facility board chair's signature. On the back page, we have some more AMP-related information. So that chart you're looking at is the total cost of ownership over the next 10 or so years, and that's based off of data that comes straight from ACES. The A file. Engine Room has done a poll. They've already created these charts for every single installation. This is not something you have to build. And then right below that is the status of the inventories. And it's kind of a good thing to compare side by side because that helps your commander understand the fidelity of that chart above. You know, if we haven't really gotten through many of our inventories, that's a pretty good indication that the chart above will probably change in the future as we get more of those inventories accomplished. If you download your prospectus and you encounter any problems, so we've got the wrong wing emblem on there, there's a formatting error, the data doesn't look right, whatever it is, you're always welcome to email our Engine Room, and the link for them is right there, as well as the phone number. Those guys are awesome. They've worked really hard on this, and they're happy to help any of you if you run into any problems. And then, as I mentioned before, you're always free to call us here in AFCEC CPAD or email us, and we will do whatever we have to make sure we get you an answer. And that's it. That's the conclusion of the presentation on the Commander's Prospectus. So now we'll go over to some questions. Okay, so the question is, when will the signed installation commander prospectus be due? And that is totally up to your Matchcom. So we have removed any sort of a suspense that had originally been placed on the installations by us because that's not our job. That's up to the Matchcom. The Matchcom suspense is the 15th of May, and they should be passing down a suspense to all of their installations, hopefully shortly.
Call your Match.
Yeah. If you haven't heard, call, email. The one thing I will say is that while this Installation Commander's Prospectus is a tool for your installation to communicate to your Matchcom, we here at AFCEC are going to look at them too. And it's not so that we can double check anybody's work or so that we can, you know, look over the Matchcom's shoulders. It's really because we want to see what's in those text boxes. We want to see, you know, what our model doesn't capture or how we can do it better in the future. So it's good feedback for us. And also, in the event that, you know, there's a project where the score just didn't do it justice, the Installation Commander's Prospectus is going to be the basis of the discussion to maybe adjust the score upwards or downwards. So without that information, there's nothing for us to go off of to try and change the score. Sure. Can I please repeat where the prospectus is located? It is on the CE portal, the Integration Program Group page. On the left-hand side in the blue bar, click on Data Pull. And then there is a folder that says Installation Prospectus. And every single installation is there. Even some I didn't know existed. And a link will be posted shortly. Looks like we've got 1 or 2 more questions coming in. Please send us the link. There it is. Okay, so the question is, how do you want them to be submitted from the Matchcom?
Tell them we'll give you.
Yeah, we'll push details to the major commands on how we want to get those. Eventually, we're going to have them posted on our CE portal page, probably in the validation document. But we'll contact you guys shortly and let you know how we want them sent up to us. Last call for questions. Okay, great. If that's it, thank you guys for tuning in. Like I said, this webinar and all of our other webinars will be recorded. We will push those links out as soon as we get them. But in the meantime, pick up the phone, email us, and we're happy to help. Have a good night.